Oh, maybe it's working. Hello, Internet. It worked. Hey, Ben. Hey, Adrian. How are you?
Very well.
Very well as well.
So Ben is back from the other side of the world, and Adrian is back from the other side of the country, right? You were with us at VCF East 2 weeks ago.
Yep.
And I've just seen lots of good Adrian coverage out there. Have you seen some of the stuff that's...
It's funny, Bill. I haven't had a chance to watch most of it, but someone sent me a screenshot of that little interview that you did, I guess when that went live on Hackaday. And someone sent me some of the comments, and people were so nice in the comments. I couldn't believe what people were saying. I had to share it with my parents.
Yeah, I shared something with my mom once.
I was like, look, people actually like me. They say I'm nice. I guess you did a good job as parents.
So, Ben, what we did was Tom Nardi from Hackaday met me there, and I was going to have a wireless mic from Amiga Bill, but he had to leave suddenly, so all we had was a single wired mic. So we went looking all over the place for somewhere to shoot the videos, and it all looked like crap. It looked like a rundown military post until behind these dumpsters, we found a flowering dogwood, and we used that for the background. Nice. And then Mike Fikes spent the next hour telling people like Jerry Ellsworth and stuff, hey, Bill wants to see you behind the dumpsters.
Yeah, that's what happened. I was like walking through, and he grabbed me. He was like, Bill needs you right now. I was like, wait, what, dumpsters? And it was literally, I was staring at a bunch of blue dumpsters, but then this beautiful tree was behind me.
So. That's funny. Now, if they'd said that, Bill, about you 25 or 30 years ago, they might have been really worried.
Yeah. Yeah.
Oh, really? Oh, really?
But they know you today, and you're a really nice guy. Your fighting days are well behind you.
So are my kegger days. Yeah, you know, I was known for stashing kegs around. Yeah. So yeah. Very cool. So Adrian, you came Thursday or Friday? Did you arrive in New Jersey?
It's funny. It's been such a blur because I had another business trip right after VCF. I think I flew into New York and I drove out, and this was Thursday, and I didn't get to the hotel until past midnight. So I'd like been flying all day and I drove for hours, and it was like that crazy East Coast traffic as they do the construction. I'm like, why is it bumper to bumper traffic at like midnight in the middle of nowhere, like in New Jersey? But I made it, and I crashed immediately. Although of course, West Coast time, it's always harder to fly east for me at least, because of that, you know, I'm trying to go to bed to wake up early, and it's only 9 o'clock my time, even though it's midnight there. So, yeah, I came in Thursday, and then we got started. I think you texted me and you're like, okay, like hotel 8:30 in the morning or whatever. And I was like, great, that's like 5:30 my time, and I don't wake up early ever. it was different. You know,
traveling is always tough.
Well, the funny thing is, too, Ben, is like there was no coffee at the event, and
how is that possible in a retro computing community?
Yeah, I mean, there was like the food concession area, Bill, right? But then they didn't get started until later.
Right.
And I was like, I got there and I was like, is there coffee? Okay. There was some in my hotel, which I drank.
If I can ever have anything to do with the organizing of these events in future, I'm going to solve that problem first.
And I did do that back when it was smaller on Fridays, and there was just a class of 30 instead of 160 like we had this time. And I actually brought in Wawa coffee and set it up.
Get one of those big travel boxes.
Yeah.
You know, of those, a bunch of cups. Everyone's happy.
Like for the staff, you know, for the people they're visiting from far away, especially because it's like that time change was brutal on me. I'm sure Jerry was feeling it as well, since she threw out her name from the West Coast as well.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right. So Friday, which is kind of my favorite day for VCF East, because I call it Kearney Day, because it's for the Kearneys, right? It's for ourselves, because you don't have to man the booth. You can go watch the speakers and interact with them and stuff. So we did that on Friday, and we had a real good crowd there, Adrian.
I mean, everyone told me, Bill, like from previous years, that Fridays were always really quiet, and there wasn't that many people, and yet it was like standing room only in the talk that I was part of, at least.
Right, and that's where I made my mission to make Friday just as popular as Saturday, you know?
That's awesome. I mean, I think like, even though, like you said, it was the Kearney day, on the floor where the exhibits were, there was still a lot of people, because David from Usagi Electric, he was just inundated immediately when he walked in. And so everyone wanted to talk to him and see his old Centurion and everything like that.
Right.
So, but yeah, I mean, I travel, then I go to these events, like I don't bring anything, and I don't have a booth even, because I'm flying and there's just no way to bring stuff.
Yeah.
So I was like, actually, this is what's funny, Bill, and you're working with the organizers a lot of times. There were definitely people that came to see me. They came to VCF East to see me, but they never found me, because I wandered around the whole time, and I was like over here, over there, in that building, and it just was like missed connections, right, kind of thing. And I'm wondering, it'd be neat if I had like a little tracker I could wear, and it would like post my Adrian
celebrity tracker.
Well, and for other people too, because like who are walking around, and like that way, folks like Jerry as well. I'm sure people came to see Jerry, and she was just all over, and you too. We were mobile, right? So it'd be kind of neat if we could like have a little like an Apple AirTag, or I don't know, whatever, and then while we were at the event, we could just put it in our pocket, and then people could like look on a website and see us. I mean, I don't know how possible that is, but that would be really cool for the folks who had a mission to meet one of us. And
as long as they don't employ those shock collars that they use for training dogs, I'd probably be okay with. You just hear a yelp and herds nearby.
Like if you go to take the shopping cart, like outside of the perimeter of some supermarket, it locks the wheel. So if we tried to leave the grounds, it's like, getting electrocuted or something.
In a prison of our own choosing. And so,
hey Ben, you should have heard Usagi giving Adrian. There was this ongoing teasing about Moneybags here.
Yeah, because I was like, I use the paid version of DaVinci Resolve for editing my videos. He's like, oh, Mr. Moneybags. He's all the
That's funny, because DaVinci Resolve is the most powerful, feature-packed. Even if you buy the paid version, it's only $250 or whatever.
Yeah, it's like $300 US.
And this is coming from a world where previously the last perpetual license version of Adobe Premiere was like $3,000, and that was 10 or 12 years ago. So come on, people. DaVinci's taking over for a reason. They don't make their money on the software anyway. They make it on all the switchers and stuff, right?
Yeah, like go Australia, like for
that's funny. Yeah, that's funny. How did he get his Centurion there though? He trekked all that way in a truck?
He brought the Mini in the truck, and he was very nervous when he spun it up. Like he did the whole thing where he unplugs the heads. And spins it for 45 minutes to get the dust out of it, and he was legitimately woohoo when it lit up.
Well, yeah, because
go ahead.
Oh yeah, well Ben, he has a Land Cruiser, or the Lexus version of a Land Cruiser, so he just like had it on his side and like slid it into the back, and it was bouncing around on.
No, even that is so precarious. Yeah, I'd be so nervous about the journey.
Well, his terminal didn't work then, and we thought it was the unit, and the consensus was give it a good wrap, and Dave wrapped it, and it actually worked. So we're like backing away from it while bowing,
I mean, that's a Dave Jones term. I always use percussive maintenance, like to try to make it work again.
Right.
So
now in the service, we called it the Muncie Method, where you take your steel pot and just slam it once. Because the thought is it was probably an impact that made it stop working to begin with. So let's give it another one. And you do it without even any warning, just to freak out the guy next to you.
I mean, this stuff is really quite durable. I mean, I think for like the Centurion, I would have been the most worried about obviously that hard drive thing. But yeah, like you said, the heads can like park off the disc and whatever.
Right.
Because the discs are made to be removable on that thing. I mean, it's that weird, those large format discs, in those big carriers. Right. So because of that, I think it's designed for a little more robustness than a modern, an 80s hard drive at least.
All right. So Chris here said they might have followed it to flaky dip switches.
Oh, yeah. I've had that issue a lot. And I always, I'm a big deoxit fan. I like put deoxit right inside dip switches and then just back and forth, back and forth, back and forth.
Me too.
It fixes them a lot of times.
Deoxit is the best. Absolutely.
Now, I used to use stuff when I was a TV repairman, but the brand names have long gone out of popularity. but I learned deoxit from Curious Mark, who's going to be with us at which one? VCF Southwest, June 23rd, 24th, I think. And then he's going to be at VCF West in August. And Adrian, you're considering going to VCF West, right?
Yes, I cannot make it to the one in Dallas. David Murray was reaching out to me. I've got some family obligations at that point. But yes, I'm checking my calendar, and VCF West in the Bay Area, that might be a go. So I guess I'll let Bill know, and then Bill will spread the word when that becomes a reality, if it becomes a reality.
Right. And the goal would be that we repeat the Webcasters Roundtable at West, and include some of the Western talent and stuff. So it's been a real good draw for the VCFs. So hopefully we keep that going. And for West, we're talking about having a reverse engineering roundtable. And I thought of our own Johan, who reverse engineered the 128 and the chip. He reminded me we put a flip-flop in a chip that we've totally forgotten about. And he's like, there's flops. And oh yeah, that's how we fixed the VIC chip. So, but it's with Curious Mark, Eric Schaffler, and Ken from the Curious Mark show will all be part of a reverse engineering roundtable is the way we're going for it.
That's amazing. There was that exhibit at VCF East, and I saw it at Midwest last year as well. The guys who have that whole Weather Channel exhibition. Did you see that, Bill?
No.
So like they had a whole simulated cable TV system. They were in the hall where David Murray was in New Jersey there.
Okay. Yeah, that was crowded, that hall.
It was really crowded. But one of the guys in that exhibit had reverse engineered all of the downlink stuff from Weather Channel. They used to transmit like the data streams for like the weather information through a satellite link, and that hardware, it's existing out there, but a lot of what transmitted the data to the receiver stuff is of course gone, because that was proprietary and held by Weather Channel. So they reverse engineered all the protocols and everything that for the satellite communication link, so they could bring up entire simulated Weather Channel networks, and they had that on display there at the
wow.
VCF. Amazing. That stuff blows my mind, that people can figure things out from like long lost technologies that are just gone and completely rebuild it. Like, wow.
Yeah,
it's really amazing.
Well, that's a lot of what you do, Adrian. That impressed me is, first off, you're agnostic. You're not religious in what you work on, and I tell you, there's a threshold when I look at something, I'll go, yep, it's broken. And you dive right in, right? Now I'm like, it's going to be a 40-year-old chip. There's no mystery for me, right? But you fix them. And that inspired me to stop being such a snob about Apple. So
hey, well, just remember the best apples were the ones using MOS chips anyway, and we all know
I think so. Yeah.
I have never actually found an Apple that had an MOS branded chip in it. Like they've always had one of the second source companies that
CenterTech or Rockwell. Yeah.
Yeah.
But it could. I have definitely put MOS branded 6502s into Apples, and of course it absolutely works perfectly. But
if you could find one that had it that was originally untouched with an MOS chip, that would be worth a fortune, because that would be a very low serial number for sure.
Indeed, I'm sure some of those Apple ones, who knows with those, maybe, right?
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
But
I'll believe you're truly agnostic, Adrian, when I see you working on some PS2 microchannel architecture. Ridiculousness.
Ben, it's funny. I have a Model 30, which is not microchannel, right? That's ISA,
right.
And I have a PS1, which is also just ISA. And I think for me, like, I kind of draw the line at stuff when it starts to become like super highly integrated, where there's like customized Cs. It's just everything is in there, and like by the microchannel era, IBM was sort of doing that, and like it just makes repairing it really hard.
It's true, and that was the death of it. The microchannel had so many things going for it from an engineering standpoint. It was superior when it was new, but they'd gotten greedy after they saw all the cloning going on with ISA, and just wanting to protect their turf. They're like, we'll do the next generation. We'll make it superior. We'll make it software compatible even. But if you're going to use it, you are damn well going to pay a big license fee. And it totally killed it. It would have actually been the next PCI otherwise. But
well, I mean, isn't it icing on the cake that the PCI Council used the same physical connector for PCI as the mic, because all those MicroChannel connectors are floating around in warehouses unsold. So like, we'll use it, flip it around, reposition it, and call it something else. Like, ouch.
Really? Yep. Slap.
This is funny you mentioned this, Ben, because like recently I have this like IBM 5150 motherboard here. So the very first IBM PC, this motherboard is faulty, so I didn't have to fix it. But when I was working on this, doing some testing on one of my videos recently, I looked up on Wikipedia. Yeah, sorry, my camera's not the greatest.
Yeah, let's see that closer up. That's
5
nice.
slots.
Look at that, it's beautiful.
This is one of the later versions that has 64 to 256K. The very first versions of this motherboard had 16K RAM bank, so you could only have a maximum of 64K on the motherboard because they use 4016. So this was a slightly later one. But what I found out about this is that IBM kept selling the 5150 and the 5160, which is the XT, and the AT 5170 all the way until I think 1987, and then they discontinued the entire line. Presumably because the PS2 line had come out and they wanted everyone to start buying that stuff. So they stopped selling. I mean, like, if I turn my camera a little bit, I have an IBM, like, you can just see the edge of it, a 5170 right here, my 286. I love that computer. And they discontinued all of these because they're like, nope, you're going to start using our proprietary stuff. And if you want ISA on an IBM, you got to buy a crappy Model 30. Well, crappy, but it's an 8088, whatever. And meanwhile, in the same batch of motherboards I was working on, I just happen to have these on the floor here. Here's a 386 motherboard, a full-size beauty.
Whoa.
And it's ISA. So as you were saying, Ben, MicroChannel was way more superior to these crappy 16-bit slots here, right? But this motherboard
it looks like a 32-bit extension on the top one though.
Yeah, it's right. Here it is. It's for RAM. I think it's for RAM expansion. Maybe there was like a proprietary RAM card. So if you want to go above the 4 megabytes of SIMs here, you could do that. But this thing has cache memory, or it's hard to do with the camera. Cache RAM.
Yep.
It is. This is what I was talking about in my video, which is amazing. So with these two motherboards here, so this 5150 and then this 386. This came out around 1989. This came out in 1981. When you run performance benchmarks on these two things, this 386 board is 25 times faster than this XT board, is the 5150. Like, that performance leap, you could run the same software on both, and it's a 25 times improvement in like from 81 to 89.
Yep. Like, and that's even with most of the software still being 16-bit at the time.
Totally, exactly. And like, anyways, I think my point being is like, I was amazed about that. But IBM, when they came out with the PS2 line, they went all proprietary, but like stuff like this was out. I could take this motherboard and just shove it into my old 5170 that came out in 83 here, because it's the same size motherboard, and have 20, well, probably not 25 times faster because that's a 286, but would have been massive speed improvement and lots of RAM. And I don't know. It's cool stuff to me.
Somebody asked if you're missing the coprocessor there.
So someone pointed out
it's a PGA socket. I think it was for the 387 math coprocessor.
Correct. So that's the coprocessor right there. And so it is missing on here. But someone I thought told me that this had a space for a 287. No, I don't think so. I was recently working on 2 of these motherboards. By the way, like, this is just a gorgeous PCB. Like,
yeah, look at that.
And the funny thing is, it was filthy dirty. So I took it and I put it in my kitchen sink and I submerged it in soapy warm water and I just brushed it, like, I caressed it with. But that's how I clean these motherboards. I just use tap water, and in Portland here, the water is so soft that it doesn't leave any water spots, and I just let it dry, and this thing works perfectly. But anyways, there's another 386, and I have the math coprocessor, but the original 386DX, you could also use the 287 from the 286 line, because I think Intel, when they came out with the 386, they didn't have the math copro ready. So there's a 40-pin DIP package on some of these, but not this one. I think it's the other motherboard that has that.
That would make sense. My second computer was And I mentioned MicroChannel because I had the pain of having to deal with it when you lose information or disks get corrupted.
Yeah, you mean like that stupid setup disk you had to use on
Yeah,
MicroChannel?
so I actually had
I forgot about that.
the computer I got through college with was a 386, and it had the 387 coprocessor in it, but it was a MicroChannel architecture, and it wasn't an IBM. It was a Memorex Telex. So there were a few brands out there that paid IBM the heavy royalties and still went ahead with it because they would just add it on top of their cost, and they would the kinds of computer companies that were selling to governments around the world. So, money wasn't an issue.
Right.
But I somehow, from a government auction clearinghouse, got a Memorex Telex 386 computer that had obviously been used in some kind of engineering context. It had an exceptionally large memory for the time. It had an extra, a memory expansion card that was in the MicroChannel 32-bit slot, and it had a special graphics card and another I/O card, probably for driving a pen plotter, but I could never figure out what it was. And it was functioning, and I was able to run DOS 6.2 and Windows 3 on it, and it got me through college. But I was never able to fully configure it because I was missing the config disks, and you couldn't get anything back in those days unless you could find the original manufacturer. And most of them had gone out of business because guess what? They thought MicroChannel was going to be the next big thing. So they invested in it and were left high and dry.
And that's like all those, that's why they had all those PCI connector or MicroChannel connectors that became the PCI bus. Yeah, I don't know. The ESA bus, the extended industry standard architecture was the same where you needed those floppy disks to configure the peripheral cards.
So unless you were running compact servers for a company, you weren't going to get much.
I see, Chris, like, how much do I want for that board? It's funny, like this stuff that I have floating around here, like this was a rescue board, right? So I generally don't sell this stuff because it's usually given to me, and I think it's unethical for me to take things that were given to me and sell those. So I usually give stuff away to, people like usually in the local area, and people always ask me like, oh, you have so many Commodore 64s, can you sell me one of them? I mean, the biggest problem is, and I think most people know this if they watch my channel, I work full time and I do my channel, 2 channels. I have no spare time. And so shipping stuff, it's just packing and shipping, I do not have time. So the people in Portland here, and there's a big retro community here, like they benefit from my excess stuff because I just text the people nearby. I'm like, do you want to whatever? And they're like, cool. And they come over and grab it, or I meet them at, one of our meetups and give it to them. So yeah, unfortunately, that's, I know people, like I do have quite a few extra motherboards, and the reality is I don't need like 5, of a certain motherboard. So I will eventually purge, but I have a hard time getting rid of things. I'm like, what if it breaks? What if it breaks? I don't want to. Anyway, sorry.
No, it's totally understandable.
I didn't have a very big computer collection, but they were prototypes. And so each one was not the board itself, but the memory that went with it,
Yeah. And Bill, it's funny because people will say, oh, Bill has these prototypes, and then he just like throws them in a box.
Yeah, that's true.
And I'm like, well, whatever, I mean, like I said, this board and these other motherboards, these were just in a box full of random junk when I got them, and they weren't in ESD bags, and yet still works perfectly from the 80s to now, Stuff is so robust.
It's all right. These are things that can be part of your estate that you pass on to your children or whatever, right? So.
Yeah, I know. I actually do think about that because I watched that show on Netflix, Hoarders, where they and I'm like, I don't want to become that. So
but at least most electronics doesn't take up too much room. There are worse things you could be collecting, like lampshades.
Ben, I don't know if you haven't seen my house, and you probably haven't seen Bill's house. It's like
No, I've got my own to deal with. I've just spent 4 weeks in Australia helping my parents and my father clear out. He's 83 nearly, and it's been a big effort for the family to help get rid of craft and we put out a lot of stuff, and a lot of it was mine. I discovered. I got there and realized I'd left a ton of old cable bits of electronic projects that I once upon a time was working on. I had a whole lot of old Pentium 2 motherboards, and I was sorely, and they're all working, and I was sorely tempted to keep one and bring it back as a retro project. And I'm thinking, well, it's not quite retro yet. It's just old enough to be annoying.
Right. Old enough that I would never have thought it'd be valuable again. You know,
and it's like, am I willing to wait another 30 years for a Pentium 2 motherboard to be worth something?
Ben, you'd be surprised. I think people are already, the prices on that era is already like shooting up. Like,
I know. I thought of eBaying stuff while I was there, and I was more interested in connecting with new family members, new nephews and nieces have all gotten married since I've been there, and they're starting to have kids. So I found that the whole relationship thing took over my brain and thinking space, so I didn't get to it. I did bring back a bunch of, I did bring back some very interesting things. Let me show you one.
Oh, cool.
You'll love this. I caught up with my friend Richard Freeman, who he's in Australia, so he can't really join us live. We're always streaming at 4 a.m. there, but he does watch the show a bit. He gave me this many years ago. This is a 5011T Logic troubleshooting kit.
Oh, does that have the current tracer in it?
It has, well, it has a probe and a little. This is very cool. The like probe I kept. The probe
has the logic pulsar in there, right?
It had a logic pulsar and logic probe, and they would sit here. And those are in one of my tool cases on the other side of the office here, and I've always kept them in the tool case. But what I have never shown anyone, or even actually, I need to try and get this working and make a video on it. This is just really cool. I need to clean it up. The box had, disintegrated foam in it. But what this does is it's like a little cartridge-based system, right? And you can get standard 7400 series devices, and you can basically, it's got all these bare circuit boards, right, and a little tool for cutting these. So what you do is you bridge where the power and ground have to connect on this side,
right,
to VCC and ground. On this side, you can connect or disconnect all of the other I/O pins on the 7400 device. You can put a socket on it, but the idea is that you plug in a known good chip on the sample. You plug that in. You put that into here, and it plugs into the side, and then you clip this end onto your board that you're troubleshooting that has the same chip on it, and it actually does a comparison. And by examining what's displayed on the LEDs for I/O, you can see if there's a defective or shorted pin or a defective input or output or whatever. It's very cool. And there's a little test module that goes on it as well. I'm not sure. I need to look up the manual for it, but this test module can go in the end there with this open.
Now, is this something you had and you brought back, or what's?
Yes, this has been sitting in my parents' under their house, the effective equivalent to a basement, although officially basements don't exist in Australia, but it's been sitting there with all my other craft, and I saw it and I'd forgotten I owned it, and I'm like, I've got to show that. So one of the streams that here in the coming weeks, I'll have it all cleaned up, and I'll actually get some chips on it and show how it works. But very cool little device for testing glue logic on old boards and stuff like that.
Right.
A friend of mine, he made a RAM tester that works very similarly to that, where you clip onto like a 4116 RAM chip, and you have a known good chip on the the test board, and it will compare. So it doesn't try to drive the motherboard with the new RAM chip, the working one, but it compares every every time the computer reads from the onboard motherboard one, and if any bit doesn't match, it turns on the LED. So you can say, oh, that chip is actually bad in
Right.
circuit.
Yeah. It's just,
So it works
it's
the
like
same way.
hardware. It's like software developers have diff tools.
Yeah, that's the hardware diff tool right there.
Hardware equivalent. This was one of the other things I thought I'd given this to someone years ago, and I was kind of miffed, but I was delighted to find I still had it. This was one of the other things I brought back that was sitting in a box at my parents' place, and the main devices have been unplugged from it, but I do still have them. This was originally designed by an engineer in Australia called Don McKenzie, and anyone from down under knows who this guy is. He's like Dave Jones knows who he is. He had an online store for many years called Dontronics, and from which most of us bought PIC development tools. He was kind of a microchip PIC and parallax reseller in Australia, and he developed a silicon chip project using this for a moving message board, much like the one behind me, before we had blue LEDs. So that's how far back it goes. It was a dual color, red, green. And using this. So this was a printer buffer design, hence the Centronics port. And you could add up to 4 megabytes of memory on this. And it was all Z80 based. And then after he designed this, he realized this could make a really cool little development kit for Z80 based coding. So he developed a firmware for downloading. It's like a firmware monitor for bootstrapping and downloading your own code. And the idea is you could put one of those Dallas battery backed RAMs in here if you wanted. And he designed this little add-on board, and it would boot up, and you'd use the DOS utilities called ZedLoad, or that goes with the ZedLoad ROM, and it would boot into a bootloader mode, and indicated by these LEDs. So you'd download your code, and then press the button. It would reset the CPU and flip this ROM with what you just downloaded into the RAM chip on here as ROM. So you could use this as a rapid development tool. It was really cool. And I found using the Wayback Machine, which I'm sad if that gets killed because we need it.
I hope
not.
not.
Things like this. But it helped me find all the original files and programs that came with this and source code that Don had written and provided with this, so I could get this working again. But that was the other thing. So, and all my old college texts with the 6502, the schematics for the 6502 single board computers we used in college in the 80s and 90s in Australia, designed by the college I went to. I've got all that so I can recreate it. I've already started recapturing that in KiCad and put on GitHub. So that's another one. But yeah, cool stuff.
Adrian, do you do KiCad? Do you ever make your own interface boards and whatnot?
Yes, actually. The funny thing is, I have a GitHub repo. Happens to have one of my PCBs here. I built a very simple 8-bit RAM expansion card ISA bus.
Okay.
And yeah, I just designed the select logic here, and you can actually map the memory up into upper memory space. So on an XT, you can go beyond 640K.
Right.
And there's actually tools in DOS to use that extra memory. And yeah, so this is one of my projects. I have a few other little things that I've done. I mean, I am a noob. I mean, I'm a novice, right? So I really don't know what I'm doing, but KiCad is certainly amazing that like free open source software. And then, of course, the manufacturing companies in China that you can turn these around in such short time for so little money that someone like me can make something that looks like kind of professional,
for $27. Yeah,
like I mean, I made it small enough that it's like it's the cheap 10 boards for $5 plus shipping. So yeah, it was like $16 or whatever. And I have another one here. This is just another like these two I happen to have sitting here. But yeah, I mean, it's just so I have done stuff. And I find it amazing that even someone who knows nothing like me, or never was trained in this, can somehow turn a PCB around and make something that works.
Right.
Like what the heck?
Well, you're going down the path that sounds familiar to me. I started in repair, right? I started as a TV repairman, and so had to kind of, I knew how a transistor worked and a tube worked, but had to figure out the rest of the stuff. And then later I got that bug of design, when it's your design going on the paper, much like you just did there. It's addictive.
Yeah, and it's like, it's been a few years since I made a new design, but I always have ideas. I mean, I know it's a thing to do right now. YouTubers all the time are like, oh, I need to do XYZ, and they just like spin up a board. And in fact, here's something this is something that I got at VCF, and it's in this 3D printed case, but it's a Fujinet device for the Apple II. So Fujinet is like a ESP32 based network disk emulator sort of thing.
Thomas Terry Holmes is on the chat channel today.
Okay, well, I've been playing with this, and what I was going to bring up is Apple used a 19-pin connector for disk drive interface on Apple computers, and that hasn't been manufactured in a long time. I think Big Mess of Wires is a company that got a company in China to make some new ones. But what they did here is my camera's not that great. They designed a little PCB here where you solder on some pin strips, and then it's got a 3D printed shroud, but it's all like off-the-shelf parts with this little PCB here that allows me to plug into a connector on the back of my Apple II that hasn't been made in, forever and cheaply. And this is incredible to me. I love this stuff. Yeah.
And I've been accused, not I personally, well, a little bit personally, but Commodore, we've been accused of using some bad connectors like the square one and stuff. And there's stories behind them all,
I mean, well, back in the day, that stuff was available. You could just order it, right? And now, like, there's no demand, so they stopped making them ages ago for all those weird.
We didn't care if the product would be around in 10 years. We just wanted to know the price tomorrow.
Yep.
So it is with commercial products, right?
Do we have questions, Bill, that we should be answering? I don't know how this works. I don't remember.
Yeah. Anybody has questions, start throwing them up on the thing. There's been a lot of comments, especially about what you were just talking about, board houses in China.
Oh, yeah. Okay.
Somebody said you can definitely repair a CRT.
I didn't know about the comment tab. I just switched over to it. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. 0.1 headers, 3D print. Yeah, that's a great. I mean, the fact that you can go and spin stuff up, it just allows you to be so creative, and you're avoiding using those chemicals that, Bill, you would have used back in the old days when you were doing your own prototype boards, right?
Right.
I guess we're offloading the chemicals to another place. There is that.
New Jersey, it's illegal to have a PCB manufacturer or a chroming house.
Really?
Oh,
yeah, because of the waste.
Yeah.
And it's probably like a lot of those companies that existed in the US probably turned into like Superfund sites, right? Where like
the MOS building is a Superfund site.
It's like, for those outside the US, Superfund is like an EPA thing where there's so much pollution in the ground, the government has to step in to help try to clean it up because it's such a mess. And these Superfund, it's FUND as in money. There's so many of them around all over the country. In Oregon, same thing, because these companies, were leaching chemicals, not always on purpose, but sometimes on purpose, but sometimes by mistake. I'm sure MOS by mistake. And they're like, oh dear, it's so toxic. We can't use this land for anything anymore. Stuff like that.
So MOS still has to, or not MOS themselves, but last I saw, 9 families still had to have water brought to them. They couldn't use their well water near MOS. And when I was working there, they had a sprinkler going in the back lot. And I made the mistake of parking where it could land on my car. And I come out for my first day at Commodore, my car is covered with sticky stuff and the leaves that fell on it that got glued to my car. And so nobody would park in that lot because of the Superfund watering, and they were aerating the groundwater.
It was groundwater. They were just using groundwater to spray the lawns or whatever, and it was toxic.
No, they were using they were aerating the groundwater. They were bringing the water up to throw it into the air as part of the remediation.
Oh my God. So that was
so it's like And you know it's not just water because these leaves are stuck to my car, right? I turned on the windshield wiper and it just made a mess. So, oh yeah, don't park there.
Now Ben will know this. I mean, this is off topic, but in Southern California, the water is so hard. If your car gets hit by sprinklers, it's like water spots, permanent water spots, practically, right?
Yeah, it's so frustrating and horrible. And actually, this was one of the, when you've lived here for a while and you go back somewhere else where you came from, like I just did for 4 weeks in Australia with family, there are certain things that used to be normal but are now shocking because you've forgotten how different it is. Things like the toilet bowls are so much smaller in Australia, just like they are in Europe.
And they don't work well.
Everyone has smaller butts here. Like, what's going on?
No, and every time I travel and I look at the damn toilets, and I'm like, you got to flush like 3 times to make them work properly. And I'm like, I don't have that problem with my toilet. It's one flush and you're good.
Yep.
I like that line from Dave Jones. He was saying we don't call it bidet plot because it sounds like the toilet.
A Bodie plot? Because
Bodie,
like bidet plot? Yeah. We call it a Bode plot. Or just for the frequency response graph. But anyway, so one of those things was the hardness of the water. Really, in Sydney, water is so much softer. It really took me by surprise. And what I'd forgotten was most people don't buy water to drink like we do here in California. Most people just get a cup and fill it from the
right.
And because the water is nice, you can do that there generally. It's not perfect. Some areas you can smell the chlorine, but generally speaking, and dishwashers, all my family were stacking dishes straight from the table into the dishwasher after scraping, bones and stuff off. I'm like, I can't do that in California. I have to rinse everything first and then add salt to the dishwasher or it just won't clean anything.
Oh, wow.
It's crazy.
Well, it's funny because I talked to all my friends and family about the whole dishwasher thing. I'm like, I always just put the dishes directly in the dishwasher, take the bones off, but I never rinse. And I'm like, they're like, but you should rinse it. I'm like, it's a dishwasher. It washes the dish.
Exactly. What's the point owning one if it doesn't freaking work?
Yeah. So I'm like, I just put the dishes right in there. But in Oregon, when I moved up here from California, like I was used to the hard water, and here it's so soft. I can wash my car. It's a dark color paint on my car, and I don't have to dry it. And there's no water spot. I could use the garden hose on the car.
Right.
So I'm tempted to move north just for that reason. Honestly,
it's definitely. And I don't know. Whenever I travel to, you can tell even taking a shower, the soft water, it doesn't feel like it washes off as easily. It's like kind of soapy still, even after you've rinsed. But in California, where it's so hard, it's like instantaneously you just feel like. Anyway, okay, totally off topic here, right?
Yeah. So somebody asked about an Apple II VGA card.
Yes. So I see that's from Adam. So the question was, so I got to tell you guys about this little project because you might not be familiar with it. So David, he's from Atlanta area, made this software-defined Apple II card. So it's using a Raspberry Pi 2040, which is that open source microcontroller that the Raspberry Pi Foundation made. And this card, which I don't have it handy because it's inside one of my computers right now, it's a little tiny board. All it has is level shifters because the Pi 4050 or 2040 runs at 3.3, and of course Apple II is 5 volts. So it just has bidirectional level shifters, and that's it. The card is entirely software defined. So he has various firmwares you can install on it, and one of them turns it into a VGA card display output for an Apple II computer. And it does this by snooping the bus, all bus activity.
Right.
So it recreates the video frame buffer because, of course, 6502, it's memory mapped video. So it recreates the entire display buffer and all the artifact color the Apple II uses, everything inside the Raspberry Pi, and outputs it with VGA. And it has another mode you can switch it into with firmware change that turns it into a Z80 for you, Ben, emulation card. Like it's an entire computer on a card with RAM and everything. So it emulates a very expensive Apple II expansion card that allows it to run CPM. Either way, it's entirely software defined. And Adam's question was, did I try it in the Franklin Ace, which is an Apple II clone? And actually I did. And I didn't really talk about it on the video I recently made about that computer. But as long as the computer is an Apple II, a close enough Apple II approximation, which all those Franklin Aces are. And I think the Laser 128 would be as well. And I haven't tried it on the Laser. The Laser 128 looks like an Apple IIc, so it's like an all-in-one compact Apple, but it has one expansion slot on the side. And theoretically, this software-defined video output card should work on that. And I have a Laser 128, so I should try it. But David recently came out with new firmware for this card, actually introduced a bunch of bugs, because I was recently working on actually the Fujinet thing here for the Apple II. This, by the way, emulates hard drive, modem, network interface, clock, like all this stuff, hard drive, all through this. Bill, you might not even know this. So IEC and on the Commodore, and the Atari equivalent, which is the SIO, right? It's stereo defined. You have device numbers. You can have any kind of peripheral, modem, whatever on there. Well, Apple took the floppy interface, which they designed with Wozniak, designed in like the early or late 70s for the Apple II, and changed it to be able to support a packetized, addressable protocol over the same physical interface. It's called SmartPort. Oh. And it allows for hard drives and all sorts of peripherals exactly like IEC and the Atari equivalent SIO. So that's what this is, ESP32 in here. You plug it into like an Apple IIc or an Apple II Plus with a SmartPort ROM card in there. And all of a sudden you have hard drives. You can do network gameplay against other computers over Wi-Fi. Like, it's crazy what you can do.
Wow.
Point being, I forgot, I was testing the Apple II VGA card, and I loaded the new firmware that David wrote for that software-defined thing. And there was a bunch of bugs that he added new features, and it completely kind of went crazy. So anyways, it's all open source. If anyone wants to know what that's all about, you just have to Google. It's called V2 Analog. I made a video, I don't know, a few videos ago about it, and it's all on GitHub. You can make your own if you want, and it's a great product. I think this software-defined expansion card thing is crazy cool to me. I mean, you're using like modern stuff, but you're mixing it with this old computer, and it's literally software-defined. Anyway, sorry, I'm just gushing.
No, I love the idea of writing a computer. You know, just write it. Just hardware engineers are obsolete because the guy with the keyboard can do everything, you know?
So did I get that correct on the banner? V2 Analog.
Yeah, oh, yes, thank you. That's it. It's a V2 Analog. And like I said, it's a fully open source project. So the Gerbers are there. It's easy to make, and it uses the Raspberry Pi 2040, which is unlike the other Pis you can actually get. And it costs like $5 or whatever. It's super cheap. And there's a big, like, once I made that video, like, it got a lot of attention. And anyways, it's a neat project, and he's talking about adding other capabilities because, of course, since it's software defined, it could be anything. Yep. It could be it could be a Wi-Fi. It could do what the Fujinet does, because the Raspberry Pi actually has a Wi-Fi version, and that's what's on my card. And yeah, you could like talk on the network. I don't know, all that stuff. It's just
those 2040s are great. Like, that's all made possible too because the RP 2040 has that PIO
mode. Yes.
Device baked in. I mean, you can do a lot with two dual core ARM Cortex M0 Plus. That's that's pretty powerful. But the PIO makes all that real-time VGA and such. And for those who haven't seen or who might be new, I'd recommend going back on Bill's channel and finding the stream where we spoke to the JP stuff, Jonathan Pallant, because he's done a lot with the RP 2040 and especially involved in some of those capabilities with the what's it called? It's another Neo. I'm spacing on it because I'm jet lagged. That's my excuse, and I'm sticking to it. But there have been episodes where we talked about how to do VGA in FPGAs, how to do VGA on an RP 2040. Jonathan joined us for that because that was something he had specialized in too.
I think like the ESP32 that's in here also can do VGA with a similar method as well. But the funny thing is about the RP 2040 is to get it to talk on a 1 megahertz bus on the Apple II reliably, you have to run it at like 240 megahertz or something like that. Yeah, because like, it just, I mean, I think people don't quite understand that, like, even though these computers are 1 megahertz, like these 8-bit computers, the TTL logic in there operates so quickly, just in nanoseconds. And when you're using a microcontroller that's running code, like C code or whatever,
it's
just slow. It's way slower. So you need, I mean, from 1 megahertz to 240 megahertz to talk reliably on the bus. Just because, I mean, obviously, maybe if you wrote in assembly language, you could make that work better. But I saw someone trying to use an RP2040. There was a video recently on a PC ISA bus, so 8 megahertz, doing the same kind of thing, software defined, and it was barely working. It was at the very limit of working because of the 8 megahertz. Just it's too fast.
Right.
Yep. This is where programmable logic is very handy.
Absolutely,
Just
yeah.
do it. Dealing with hardware, do it in hardware if you can.
Well, what I'm seeing is the peripheral is 20 times more powerful than the old vintage computer that it's hooked to.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know about.
Can't keep up.
I'm not sure the RP2040 how power. I don't know if you could emulate an entire like Apple II inside an RP2040, maybe, but it's not as powerful as people think. It's it's only a couple dollar microcontroller, so. But I guess the ESP32 is a couple dollars, and it's also powerful enough to run an entire computer. So, but that's not the point. I think someone mentioned, I saw a comment fly by about how 8-bit computers are such good teaching tools.
Yes.
Right.
They're so approachable. Like you can program at the hardware level, and that's so unattainable, like on everything. Even if you work on an Arduino, you're using, if you don't do it like a assembly language, you're using C, and it's all abstracted away, with libraries and stuff. You can't.
And that's exactly what I love about things like, I'm just trying to find this schematic here. I've got this open. About this, right? This is the second schematic. I haven't replicated this one quite yet. Yeah, there's 2 pages on here, so let me show you. These are the 2 schematics of the Zim microcomputer that we learned on in college.
Neat.
I was playing with this in 1993, and this had been originally designed and built in 1987 or 89, actually. If you see the schematic there, it says May 89. They designed this using 6502, that a 8-bit EEPROM, 8-bit RAM, 6551. So they did the whole MOS chipset. Most of these actually had Rockwell chips in them by then because that's what they could actually purchase. The 6522 and some registers. And that's the first page of a basic microcomputer system. But the glue logic is all done in 74 series on the next page. You see that here.
Yep.
There's the RS-232 port. The ROM monitor did a serial interface to an editor and download tool that we had running on DOS on the host machine. And everything's here. And this is just one page in the appendix of the entire class student guide, which described every capability. And because the point of the course is you learn microcomputer systems. And so we learnt memory mapping. We learnt interrupts and interrupt handling routines. And we learnt memory mapped IO. And we learnt, using latches to switch things and do clever stuff like that. And it was all here in standard and De Morgan equivalent gates, and we could analyze, and we had lessons in the class where we went through all of this, and we could see how the ROM monitor was written. If I look at the first page again, you'll see there's this output of this latch, so we could address this latch, and the phase 2 clock was what clocked that latch from the 650 to the second phase. And we could write to bit 7, which would assert this step signal, right? And that step was taken into the memory mapping and glue logic for enabling and generating a non-maskable interrupt. So the ROM monitor had single stepping implemented in software using a non-maskable interrupt that had the non-maskable interrupt had different states. So you could check what generated the interrupt. If the interrupt was generated by the step, it would then take whatever was on the stack and what was at the last memory location and send that as a string of serial bytes to the host computer so we could see what instruction was just executed and what the current status was. So we could single step through our own code.
Yeah.
As we're testing and learning how to write software. All done using this hardware. and you could see exactly how the teachers had designed this to implement it. And it was just brilliant. I didn't value it at the time. I honestly didn't. I'm like, oh, why are we? This was 1993. I was fresh in college. I'm like, why are we using this old 6502?
Yeah.
I'm sorry, everyone. I do apologize. I appreciate it now. I didn't at the time. I'm like, we should be doing 8051 or, yeah, and we did. We moved on to 8051 a couple of semesters later. I did a project using 8051, but
it's so much, all the stuff is integrated. So much more is integrated into that chip. So you don't have it in
the best
logic.
you have is the best you have is the data sheet.
Right.
And a whole lot of software user manual to read through and then try to understand it. It's much easier to really understand what's going on when you have something broken down into discrete logic like this. So much easier.
Well, Ben, and it's funny because like seeing this, and I've been peripherally involved with the the Commander X16 project, and I have the board right here, which is this modern.
It's beautiful. That's a great project, by the way. Where do people go to look for that?
It's not out yet. David Murray, this is like his sort of brainchild, and there's a big team working on it. But if you just Google Commander X16, you'll find like the wiki, and there's a Discord and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
But the reason why I brought this up though is just like what you were showing there, Ben. The way this works, this has been designed in exactly that way. All the memory, because this has banked memory, banked ROM, banked RAM. It's all 74 TTL logic, all of it. There's no PALs on here. There's no CPLD. The graphics subsystem is handled by an FPGA because you just can't get a good graphics chip anymore. But 6502, there's 6522s, all DIP, all. It's like the schematic looks just like what you were showing. In fact, I have a little bodge on here, over here. There was a timing problem with the way the bank select register was working. So I was helping the guys troubleshoot that. So I lifted a pin 5-2, 5-1, this kind of stuff to get the timing right on that. But
and those are those 8-bit ISA slots on there, or is it a different pinout?
It is proprietary for this system, and they are the same size. Oh no, they're not even the same size as ISA. I can't remember how many pins it is.
Okay, so you can't accidentally break it.
Yeah, that was the point, because originally the slots were the same as Apple II slots, and the concern was someone might plug an Apple II card into it. So I don't think it's even ISA, but it's cool because it has a support for it's like a PC. It's like ISA, where it's not, the select lines are on all the slots, but you can also have audio cards, and the audio feeds back into the motherboard and mixes with the onboard audio. There's a Yamaha sound chip, and I'm gonna make a video more about David's made a bunch of videos about this current iteration, which is like close to production, but there hasn't been a really technical deep dive that I don't think that's been out there yet. So I've been working on, I'm going to make a video that's a more technical deep dive on how this works. And there are lots of other alternative modern, 8-bit computers. But the thing I like about this is because it's all TTL logic, well, it's like ACT logic, but it has a schematic like you were showing where you can look and just see how the bank selection works.
Right.
The gates, it's all right here. It's a great learning tool for that exact reason. And I freaking love it. And you can program this at the bare metal, just like any other 6502 thing. And, it's more capable than a 64 because it runs at 8 megahertz and stuff. But yeah, anyways, very cool project. I'm very excited to be part of that.
Yes, that is awesome. And I can totally imagine like good schools and colleges that want a good system for teaching microcomputer principles or computer principles in general should be ready to invest in those for labs.
Yeah, like
they really should.
The Z80, that's it. You said exactly the thing. Everything after these processors, so much was integrated into them, all those micro, 85, the 8051s and the whatevers. It like takes away a lot of that work. It makes it so much easier to use. It's great for companies making a thermostat or whatever you're going to, whatever, but it doesn't teach you those fundamentals that you kind of need to know to do it with these old things. So
I want to answer that question Eddie put up there about, did my instructors test us on deliberately breaking something on the board? Not in that first class. There were 2 classes. There were 3 actually. We had a different class called Computer Service Lab 1 and Computer Service Lab 2, two classes where we actually deep dived into IBM PC 80 architecture. And we even learned how to diagnose and repair the switching power supplies at the time. And that's where they actually introduced faults and problems. And we learned to do that because, yeah, this was a college level course. I was doing what's equivalent to an associate's degree. Later on, I went and did my bachelor's at USQ, and that was way deeper and awesome as well for different reasons. But so we had different classes for that, and that's where we looked at also disk drives and adjusting. We talked about this before we started the show, reading a floppy disk and adjusting the heads using the eye diagram. The first time I ever saw an eye diagram in my life was in college when we were learning how to diagnose floppy disk drives and align heads to get them properly reading the tracks on a reference disk. So we did all that stuff, and it was a lot of fun and challenging and really valuable because that teaches you more fundamentally how things really work, I think, than a lot of the university level first year and second year courses that some people do. So yeah, super valuable. But then later on in the second microcomputer systems class, we had our own board with a 6502, which I have shown on this show before. More than a year ago, I brought it out. And that one, I have the whole source code and all the schematics for, but we had to wire in our own components using wire wrap on that one. It was a partially completed design. And what we had to do as students was we couldn't start using it and debugging until we had the serial port. So we had to wire in the 6551 and the Max 232 all by hand and wire it up with blue wire. We'd either solder it or use wire wrap, get it working, get it memory mapped where we wanted it, and then connect to it with the host and start our development project. And the only major requirement for our development project was it had to hinge on using interrupts. We couldn't do something that was procedural or polling. We had to use interrupts. That was like the main criteria for
what
getting
year was all this, Ben? When were you doing this?
That was 1993.
Right. So like we're similar age, obviously, because I was going to university around the same time, and
yeah,
my major was computer science. So of course I wasn't touching the electronic side of things. And the weird thing is, and they always say hindsight is 20/20, right? Like maybe I picked the wrong major and I should have gone into electrical engineering, and because this is sort of what I'm doing now, but I'm uneducated, about it. But
you've got the best education you can possibly have, which is the only true one anyway, and that's a self-education.
Yeah.
You think about it, even when you're enrolled in a course, you're the one doing the learning. It can't be done for you.
True. It's funny in a way because like I always said, throughout the years, I've had jobs where I had people work for me. I've had to hire people. And I was just talking to someone about this today about certifications, especially like, people get Microsoft certified or Cisco certified, stuff like that. And I'm like, to me, there's a difference between street smart and book smart. Street smart is like self-taught people who are motivated to learn stuff and they've figured it out on their own, and whether using Google or whatever to help you out nowadays. But in the old days, you were trial and error and you get to the solution. That's like street smart. It's like figuring out how things work. And that problem solving skill is something that I don't know necessarily how well that's taught in school, because I had people come to me to get a job and they had all the certifications, and I'd make them problem solve and they get stuck really quickly and easily. And I was just like, I'm not sure. I don't know. So yeah, you're right about what you said about teaching yourself. It matters a lot.
Yeah, I was known for being bad at math, but good at troubleshooting. I could fix anything, but I needed somebody around me like a Dave Haney or a Mike Fikes to act as my co-processor, So I'm going to start introducing Mike as my co-processor. Yeah,
that's a good one.
I love it.
You might as well get an MIT grad for a math processor if you're going to do it,
By the way, I see a question here about the TRCV
Yes.
Model 2. That computer actually, is totally working perfectly.
Wow.
This was one that I found. I made a bunch of videos about it because it was abandoned. When I first got this machine given to me, it was saved from being recycled. And I opened the lid and there were like no screws, and there was leaves and debris inside the computer. And
wow.
The Model 2 has a card chassis thing going on, and CRT and disk drive, 8-inch disk drive. I got that computer fully fixed, and it works perfectly. And actually, I ended up giving it away to someone local in town here because someone else, another viewer of mine, was visiting from back east and had a brand new, really never used Model 2 that someone gave to him, and he wanted to give it to me. So he put it in the back of his car and was out here visiting. So he gave me this mint, perfect condition Model 2, which is this huge TRS-80. And so I had two, and I don't need two because they're huge. So I gave away the one that had leaves in it now that it worked well. And yeah, as far as I'm aware, that thing is still working perfectly.
What's your favorite computer you've fixed? I don't know if that's a fair question, but I'll try it.
I am not good at picking favorites, whether it's food, computers,
Right.
whatever.
What led you the most? What made you feel happiest then when it worked?
I mean, I get really excited when anything works. And I got to say, that Model 2, the TRS-80 I was talking about, actually, it had a really obscure problem on it. And the problem with that machine, because it had a card chassis, you know, makes it extra hard to troubleshoot because you can't just run the whole computer on your desk and, you know, probe around to see what's going on. And I didn't at the time have the expander thing where you plug a card into another card, you know, to move it out of the chassis. So it was doing this crazy thing where it would just sort of sometimes crash and not work. And it turned out that a friend of mine and I started working on a diagnostic ROM for Z80 based computers. And I think we wrote this originally for the TRS-80 Model 3, which is a different model, a machine entirely. They're both Z80, but the architecture is very different.
Yeah.
So we wrote it for the model. It did a full RAM test, and it was a ROM you would drop in, and it would do very fancy RAM tests, not the really simple stuff. We were doing the whole, I forgot the names of them now. You know, when it goes up and down and adds the bits together, and anyways, it was able to detect every kind of bit error. Well, I asked him to port that to Model 2, which has RAM banking and stuff. And when we did, and this was in my video, I put the diag ROM in there in this machine that was crashing randomly. And as it started testing the RAM banks, the floppy drive started like coming on and off, which we were not talking to the floppy drive at all. And it's IO based, you know, Z80
IO based.
Yeah. So it had some kind of short on an address line, or
there was a TTL chip was using on the floppy controller. It had to do with bank selection, and it was creating bus contention because the floppy controller was trying to write to the bus at the same time as the RAM card. And yeah, so I figured out with this diagnostic ROM that we wrote, and then I was able to zoom in, you know, with the schematics, find out exactly which chip based on the symptoms, again, using like what you're seeing, even visually, because I see the floppy drive come off and on as it was switching RAM banks. And I'm like, well, it has to be this one chip. And sure enough, I switched it out and it fixed that computer.
Wow.
I mean, and I felt so freaking excited because I spent so many hours racking my brain, and I don't like to just change chips. And
Right.
That's a bad way to fix things, right? You got to like try to figure out what's wrong. But when you don't have the right tools, because I didn't have a diagnostic ROM and I'm not good at assembly. So my friend David here in Portland wrote this assembly, this ROM code for me. And I just helped him, give him documentation. Like, these are the IO ports we got to talk to and how to talk to the screen and stuff like that. And that freaking gave me the tools I needed to like visually see what was wrong and quickly find the problem.
Yeah.
So two things, good friends and tenacity. What you mean.
and a good RAM test.
You know, it takes a village, as they say. That's the great expression. And this community has all these people that are willing to help. And it absolutely it warms my heart every time that happens. Like, if I'm stuck with a problem, so many people offer up so many useful suggestions, and like people from all around the world will reach out and like, hey, I can write that code for you, or I can help troubleshoot this, or, you know, whatever. Like, people are so great in this community. And that, I mean, I fixed a bunch of things using other people's help. You know, even though they weren't here with me in person, it still was possible. And that, how amazing is that? Something we didn't have 20 years ago.
Right.
Yeah.
It's why, you know, I give my time to VCF, as it is a community that feels kind of like family, you know?
Yeah.
Well, I'm sorry, Ben, I know you were going to say something with VCF. No. Like, the first time I went to VCF, that was last year in Midwest. And then I was at East again. And, you know, when you're there, you're in this bubble. of everyone is there for the same reason. We all
Yeah.
love this old stuff. You can go talk to anyone about it who's there and they're like excited and they want to talk. And I don't mean because it's me. I mean, I think anyone who's there can go talk to anyone else.
Right.
We're all there for the same purpose. And when you leave, it's like this letdown because you're back in real life.
The shakes. And
Yeah, and you're just like, you're like, I was in this like bubble of amazing people and fun and 3 days of insanity, and then you're back home and no one cares. You talk to anyone about the computer you're working on, they're like eyes glaze over. They're like, "What's for dinner tonight?" You know, that kind of thing.
Right.
So
nobody stopping you to introduce themselves because they recognized you. Yeah.
Exactly. And like I chatted with people post VCF East this time, and you know there were people who had gone for the first time, and they had feedback like this was like a life-changing experience. Like I live where they live. There isn't this community that's around them of retro people. And they're like, I've never felt this community around me that are people who are supportive. And look, we're all nerds. We all have like weird issues, you know, maybe social anxiety, things like that. Right. And
it's just really good to know there are other people in this world who are birds of a feather, you know, who are.
Exactly.
Though
So
if you had seen me in the 80s, you wouldn't have thought I was a nerd.
While you on like a motorcycle with like
long hair, yeah, it hung out at the biker bar, that type thing. Yeah,
that's awesome. That is so awesome.
Yeah. I had a programmer one time ask me what the difference between a hardware engineer and a programmer was. I grabbed a bottle of Tabasco sauce and I'm like, look, slam it down and just look at him, and he goes, "Got it." So that was the difference. So we definitely had the different layers of people going there. So, well, very cool. Thanks for joining us today. Hey, Ben, do you want to do your shout out?
Yes, I did want to say a huge heartfelt thank you again to Brendan Mayer. Well, I mentioned Brendan about a year ago because Brendan actually reached out and donated the money we needed for our StreamYard subscription for the year. And while I was in Sydney, he met up with me for a beer because he happened to be there. He works in mining and high reliability sort of stuff. And Bill had actually sent him an old Lattice PAL and CPLD development kit a year ago to get him out of a bind where he was looking for the PAL ASM and other software he needed to maintain some legacy equipment. And he's just a super nice guy, very knowledgeable, also into all this old stuff, but not as a hobby. He actually maintains high reliability mining equipment where safety is an issue. So instead of redesigning or replacing things in Australia, in the outback, they do whatever they can to keep things running. And so a lot of this gear is running on 6502s, wow, Z80s, and so on, and old pals and gals and Lattice ISP levers and all sorts of things. So, so as a thank you, Brendan was wanting to reach out again. We had a beer, and he sent me the money to pay for this coming year of StreamYard as well. So thank you very much, Brendan, and we appreciate you a lot. This means a lot to all of the viewers too. So,
yep, great.
That's amazing.
So, and Adrian, so the one thing I wanted to mention, Adrian, was Friday night. How cool was that at the VCF East, where we went to the arcade with Jerry and everybody?
Yeah, that I hadn't really got time to spend time with you or Fran or Jerry, you know, in person before. So that was really fun experience. We were in Asbury Park, and I don't know what was the name of that arcade, Bill. Do you remember?
Silver Ball.
Silver Ball, yeah. And like we had dinner reservations. Well, we wanted to put dinner reservations, but it was like a long wait. So we all went to the arcade and we bought like an all-night pass. And then we had dinner, and then we went back to the arcade afterwards. We played. They had a zillion pinball machines, and it was a night.
I'm suffering FOMO. You wouldn't believe right now.
There was this.
I should have been there, but I just had to get to Australia to see my parents. But next year.
Yeah.
And VCF West. VCF
you don't want to place any money on the table when playing Jerry Ellsworth.
No. Oh no. No way.
Jerry has 80-something pinball machines.
He has skills.
And skills, mad skills. I am terrible at pinball, even though Portland's a big pinball city. Jerry's from the Portland area,
Right.
And then she had lots of pinball machines here. And I don't know if she's okay with me telling this story, but she told me that when she was here in Portland, she lived here. She used to have, when you have that many machines, you put them out in bars and restaurants, to make some money. And she was like, the best money in Portland I ever made on pinball machines was when they were installed in strip clubs.
Right.
We have more strip clubs in Portland than like any other city per capita, I think it is.
Wow.
And she's like, I still have machines that have like glitter on them from the strip clubs. So,
Right.
Anyway, sorry, family-friendly window radiating out the window here.
No, that's and I remember when maintaining arcade machines is hard work. I mean, you got to put those in trucks and take them out and put them back and take them out.
And remember at Silver Balls in Asbury Park, there were some machines from like the 40s and the 50s that antiques, and like those things must be a bear to keep running all the time.
Yeah.
They had one thing I'll have to mention too. There was a 2-player joust pinball machine there that I had never played before. That was so fun. You had like head-to-head play with another person, and you're trying to get the ball on the other side, and really cool stuff. So yeah,
that is really cool.
I think there weren't that many made of that particular machine, and I had a bunch of rounds on it. It was absolutely a blast. So
cool.
Very good.
Well, again, thank you for joining us, and we hope to see you at VCF West August 4th and 5th, which is a Friday, Saturday. We're going to do the Friday, Saturday thing again. Ben's talking about coming.
It's on the West Coast. I don't, at this stage, have any other priorities, so I should be able to make West. Just need to get my travel plans in order and make it happen.
And then don't forget about VCF Southwest, Bill, in Dallas coming up, right?
That's very soon.
In June 23rd, 24th, 25th, I think.
Yeah.
And I'll be there. Dave, 8-Bit Guy will be there. Dave Usagi will be there. June from Nibbles and Bites will be part of the roundtable. Action Mark. Retro. Curious Mark. Yep. And that'll all be very cool.
Excellent.
So great. So excellent. Well, I want to thank everybody at home for putting up with us for an hour and 16 minutes. But as always, time flies by when we're having fun. And I urge everybody to have a safe and a good weekend.
Thank you. It was a pleasure being on the show. Thanks for the invite.
Thanks again, Adrian. Great to have you back.
Thank you, guys.